this and we can gather. And we'll chant a little bit. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivare Hari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivare Hari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivare Hari Sodanandana Praje Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Praje Janaranjana Munati Ravana Chariyamuna Ravana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivare Hari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivare Hari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Sodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Ravana Charya Nati Ravana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Nitili Pavishtom Vishnupad Paramam Sarpari Vajrakacharya Rothyatra Jyoti Surendris Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Bhakti Yatradam Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi Hari Bol. So Hare Krishna, everyone joining for the Sunday feast today. It's nice to see devotees gathering and coming to hear. And that's what I'm hoping that we can do today is hear, and we can hear a little bit from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, text 23. Excuse me, text 22. Anyas chanyanto mam ye janta payupashyate tesham nityabhayuktanam yogashamam vaham yaham. Anyas chintayanto mam ye jana payupashyate tesham nityabhayuktanam yogeshmam vaham yaham. Word for word. Anya, having no other object. Chintyanta, concentrating. Mam, on me. Yea, those who. Jana, persons. Ayush pashyate, properly worship. Desham, of them. Nitya, always. Abhayuktanam, fixed in devotion. Yoga, requirements. Shemam, protection. Ahami, carry. Aham, I. The translation. But those who always worship me with exclusive devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack, and I preserve what they have. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. One who is unable to live for a moment without Krishna consciousness cannot but think of Krishna 24 hours a day, being engaged in devotional service by hearing, chanting, remembering, offering prayers, worshiping, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, rendering other services, cultivating friendship, and surrendering fully to the Lord. Such activities are all auspicious and full of spiritual potencies, which make the devotee perfect in self-realization, so that his only desire is to achieve the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such a devotee undoubtedly approaches the Lord without difficulty. This is called yoga. By the mercy of the Lord, such a devotee never comes back to this material condition of life. Shema refers to merciful protection of the Lord. The Lord helps the devotee to achieve Krishna consciousness by yoga, and when he becomes fully Krishna conscious, the Lord protects him from falling down to a miserable condition of life. Anyas chanyanto mam yajana paryupashate shemam nitya beyuktanam yogakshemam vaham yaham. But those who always worship me with exclusive devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack, and I preserve what they have. So when I spoke with Koshak Prabhu today, or not today, a little while ago, about the topic of this talk today, I had in mind a topic, and I don't know if anyone on here had got the topic or heard the topic. The topic I gave him was developing your spiritual resume. And the reason why I chose that topic was at the time I had to create a little bit of an updated version of my resume. And I'm in education, and so part of the resume is what's called a curriculum vitae. And this is like a development of like what you do and what you've researched and different projects that you've been in. So I had to really create something like that for myself. So I didn't know how to do that. And so I took some like advice from devotee resumes online. And so I had some in mind, some devotees that were working out there in the education field, but would have had to have created something like this for themselves. So when Kaushik asked me about the topic, this is, in a sense, what was running through my life and running through my mind at the time. So I am framing it today, even in that regard. And I'm want to talk about this verse a little bit, and really about this 9th chapter, because it fits really nicely in how someone works in Krishna consciousness. Or if you wrap it the other way around, how someone in Krishna consciousness works. And it's interesting because someone in Krishna consciousness, they're Krishna conscious. They exist in relationship with their devotional service and relationship with the deities. And so the active part of their life at times is very, very different, doing the same types of activities that someone right next to them who doesn't have that same consciousness. So being a devotee, in many ways, is about applying one's consciousness and what one's conscious of. So in this regard, Krishna is breaking some stuff down in this chapter. And in some ways, I am trying to imagine how like a resume is broken down. So when putting together some of the resume, the main experience that someone would want to know is, what's your educational background? So where did you go to school? What did you go to school for? What did you learn? What is your experience? What are some of the real life experiences that you've been through, and also what you've put out into the world? And like that. Also your references. And so in this regard, Krishna is giving us a very good reference, because the first half of this chapter is really Krishna establishing why Krishna is Krishna, why Krishna is the absolute. And so Krishna explains, and it also explains that fools deride him when he appears as a human form in this, because actually there's a lot more going on. And Krishna explains, so he establishes himself almost as the supreme reference. But right away, he's also establishing what the educational criteria is. And in the sense, what the criteria is for looking for devotional service. And he says that this knowledge is the king of education, the most secret of all secrets. And that it's the purest knowledge. And that it gives direct perception of the self. It's everlasting, and it's joyfully performed. So that right away, in terms of just establishing for us what a good candidate for anyone to let into our business and anyone to let into our life, Krishna himself is establishing that he has very good references, he can give very good references, and also that what he brings is actually the king of all education. And so someone who has that also is a little bit engaged in that. And that's the problem that the devotee might run into in the world, is that devotional service is so fun, but at the same time, what do we do and how do we maintain ourselves in the world? So Krishna explains, Srila Prabhupada explains that he breaks it down. He says, one is unable to live for a moment without Krishna consciousness, but can think of Krishna 24 hours a day, being engaged in devotional service. And so that compulsion, really, that a devotee feels toward serving Krishna, that when they enjoy their service and when they are engaged in devotional service in a way that there's some kind of reciprocation, the devotee very, very realistically can feel a connection to their service. So, for instance, I did cook the Wednesday feast, and I would spend sometimes like a week thinking about that. I know, even seeing some devotees on the call, there are feasts throughout the year that you put some thought into and make sure that it happens. And it's like that devotional service isn't always something that's being performed in the moment, but actually it's in the preparation, and it's in the thought process, and it's in the actual buying of the bhoga and the exchanges that people have when they're doing these things and actually executing and performing the devotional service. That this becomes a very preferable way that devotees find ways of dealing, even in ways that they have difficulty doing in their own lives. They find ways to do it because it's for Krishna. So a devotee both wants to be engaged and can be engaged 24 hours a day in devotional service. So a devotee may find themselves in this. And what does that look like? So that looks like, Prabhupada breaks it down in the purport: hearing, chanting, remembering, offering prayers, worshiping, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, rendering other services, cultivating friendship, and surrendering fully to the Lord. So someone who is very much attached to that will be found hearing, chanting, remembering, somewhere offering prayers, somewhere they're worshiping, somewhere they're serving the lotus feet of the Lord. The wonderful thing sometimes is running into devotees at the store, running into devotees somewhere, and they're engaged in devotional service. And I remember there was a devotee traveling with Chandramalai Maharaj, and he was in a health food store, and I was in there, and I saw a seat getting beads from behind. And I said, Haribol, and he actually was in town with a number of devotees that were visiting another devotee. So things like that, it's you'll find devotees out there doing these things, like very, very real. I remember one of the devotee just crossing the street one day with a bead bag in hand, like walked right in front of the car. It was like such an auspicious moment. But you'll really actually find that there are people out there who were very happy just doing this. Why? And Prabhupada explains, because such activities are all auspicious, full of spiritual potencies. They make a devotee perfect in self-realization, so that his only desire is to achieve the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the conundrum of a devotee, especially here in the West, where it's sometimes very difficult, and the monetary value of things and working, it's like a very, very difficult thing, and sometimes you find that you have to work jobs, and especially in Grihastha life, and sometimes even devotees living in the temple have different situations. And I remember one Mataji moving in the temple, and she had student loans or something like that. And that was like a very big, consideration for her. So just the way that the material life here in the world Western world is laid out, sometimes come with, literally a lot of stuff that they have to reconcile, even when they want to just renounce everything to Krishna. Because it is attractive, and Prabhupada finishes off his purport. He says that when he fully becomes Krishna conscious, the Lord protects him from falling down into the miserable condition of life. And that's actually why you see people come to Krishna consciousness. And that's why we see people really gravitate in the qualities that they want to see. They actually become attracted to Krishna consciousness. So even though there are difficult things in life that they're going through, somehow this promise of the Lord, that actually the Lord will protect them, this promise of protection by the Lord is a really enticing promise. And to see that people are engaged actually in worshiping the Lord with surrender. And so who are these people? And Krishna explains in another verse, a little bit down, that Osanaprita, those who are deluded, the great souls, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of divine nature. They're fully engaged in devotional service because they know me, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. Again, same thing. What a wonderful reference to have someone original and inexhaustible. And also in here, he speaks about how your friends too. What do they do? And again, Krishna explains it. They're always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me. These great souls perpetually worship with devotion. Prabhupada, he explains in the purport that this soul is a Mahatma. This soul is his great soul, and that it cannot be manufactured by rubber stamping an ordinary man. So actually, these are qualities that we should attain to, and these are activities we should attain to. So even though we are living in the material world, we should always be chanting the glories, endeavoring with great determination. We should bow down before the deity, and the great souls perpetually worship, and these great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. And so we should really aspire for not just to worship, but worship with devotion. And this can't be rubber stamped, and this is something that we should aspire to, and it should be an authentic way that we practice. And so this is what makes one a Mahatma. is someone who's always engaged in chanting the glories of the Lord. He has no other business. He's always engaged in the glorification of the Lord. And he breaks it down that actually this engagement is what actually differentiates him from the impersonalist. So any other type of spiritual pursuit might say, give up something, and that it would include glorifying the Lord. But a devotee is attached to glorifying the Lord. So by this attachment to something, that proves that he's not a materialist. Prabhupada explains here. And that because there's a question of glorification, and that an impersonalist wouldn't glorify, wouldn't be attached to glorification of the Supreme Lord. And Prabhupada explains that that's devotion. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, and Smaranam, remembering him. And that this attachment, this is what fixes the soul in the service of the Lord. And that to achieve success, he engages all activities, mental, bodily, and vocal, and everything in the service of the Lord, Shri Krishna, and that's called Krishna consciousness. And it's interesting that mental, bodily, and vocal, and part of the vocal means that we should be attached to glorifying the Lord. Great souls, they strictly observe these rules and regulations, and therefore they're sure to achieve the desired result. And then it just affirms that this is actually, this process, though, it's easy and it's performed happily. And that he gives a really, I guess, affirming statement in this purport. And this is the purport to text 14. He wraps it up and he says that this person can live in this life in devotional service guided by an expert spiritual master and in any position, either as a householder or a sannyasi or a brahmachari, in any position and anywhere in the world. He can perform this devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and thus become a Mahatma or a great soul. And so this is the offering, actually, of devotional service, is that it's not a myopic process, that it's devotional service looks this way, although it does look this way. There's chanting the glories, endeavoring, bowing down before me. These look a certain way, but how they're executed and the way that a devotee executes it, it's in connection with the relationship that devotee has with Krishna and that devotee has with the devotional service. And so these people are the distressed, financially destitute, the inquisitive, and those who are engaged in cultivation of knowledge, that these are all people that will come to devotional service for that promise of protection. And then in that engagement in devotional service, they may be tinged with distress, financial destitution, inquisitiveness, like overly inquisitive without coming to a conclusion and just checking everything out, or those who engaged in the cultivation of knowledge, which itself is explained a little bit later that this knowledge can tend to, if we're just collecting knowledge and just never, also same thing, never coming to a conclusion, but somehow this devotional service, this is the where the actual engagement starts. So there are, let's say for this candidacy, there are less strong candidates. Prabhupada mentions here. He says there are others who come and it's still a little bit lower than these that tinge our devotional service, or one's devotional service, or one's beginning of devotional service, or seeking devotional service, or this connection. In that those are he who worships himself is one with the Supreme. He who concocts some form of the Lord and then worships that, and he who accepts universal form as a Vishwarupa. And then he said even lower than that are people who see themselves as God. And so we can see also that these paths people have been on, and they've also come to devotional service. So it's room to apply the devotional principles. And what are those devotional principles? Well, it starts to really lay it out in this chapter that a devotee does these things, and they're engaging in this process, and that process is a thing that's making them happy it's joyfully performed. And these lists of these activities of devotees, I am thinking of in Vajrayana. And there is a list: Shravana Kirtana, Smarana Vandana, Padasevana Dasyare Pujana, Sakya Atmani Vedana, and then Govinda Das Abhilasare. That the translation is that in this song, this like desire to serve Krishna and to not be able to serve Krishna. Both day and night I remain sleepless, suffering the pains of the heat and cold, the wind and the rain, snow. For a fracture of what? Flickering happiness. So I have uselessly served with it in miserly men. But the opposite of that is, how does a devotee engage? Is they actually engage with desire and great longing to be in this 9 processes of bhakti. And the list he gives is hearing the glories of Lord Hari, chanting these glories, constantly remembering him and offering prayers to him, serving the Lord's lotus feet, serving the Supreme Lord as a servant, worshiping him with flowers and incense, so forth, and serving him as a friend, and completely offering the Lord one's very self. And this one's very self, that offering and that willingness to not proverbially or metaphysically surrender oneself, but actually engage in a way that, and do things in a way that one surrenders part of themselves to Krishna. Not an entirely internal process, although that internal process has to be there. And so what is that internal process? That internal process makes up a very large portion of the 64 items of devotional service that are laid out in Nectar of Devotion. And these are very internal things. We won't go through the majority of those, but there is a list, and the list is, in a way, very practical advice that one can see. So, inquiring from the spiritual master how to advance in Krishna consciousness. Even you can find devotees often write to senior devotees and spiritual masters and confidants, ask them questions. It doesn't need to be deeply philosophical. I remember a devotee had a question about a goldfish, keeping goldfish or something. But as someone who is going through these processes, I mean, it might be small, but for them, understanding like that t-shirts in the bathroom, for instance, devotional t-shirts in the bathroom. I've seen a number of different devotees reach out to senior devotees to understand things and just try to clarify the conclusion. There's a very big culture of Srila Prabhupada's letters and devotees writing to Srila Prabhupada. So there's a couple websites you can see Prabhupada's letters, and Prabhupada's letters are really practical advice about stuff. So just as inquiring from the spiritual master how to advance in Krishna consciousness, this may be, how does this activity that I have that's in me that I want to do, how can I either engage it or how can I coach it? Prabhu also mentioned I joined in 1993, and we could talk about that because I joined through Krishna Core, which was devotees engaging hardcore rock music in spiritual messages. And I was one of those young people that heard spiritual messages. I was already vegetarian, but when I heard some of that message, it wasn't just a social issue. It was something from the heart, and I understood something about like how bhakti was connected, just because I had met the devotees and they weren't just preaching a social change or a social issue, but they actually had some message. The message was in the song, but also they were wearing dhoti and sika and had literature and Srila Prabhupada's books and prasadam and neck beads, and it was amazing. And so like that was just under these instructions to just engage that propensity in Krishna service. But the result of that was many times in the 90s, like the Sunday feast was full of many different people who were coming from these other preaching missions that were going out there in terms of spreading Krishna consciousness. So you'd see devotees with tattoos, Krishna and Sanskrit tattoos, but they had never been to the temple before. They would have like Hare Krishna tattooed on them, Krishna art, like that. So just that alone, inquiring from the spiritual mind. That was one of the qualities, one of these things that, that pilgrimage to India. Many devotees go to pilgrimage, like they work and then they save some money and they go on pilgrimage somewhat regularly, or they try to work from home in India, have property over there, friends who have property, accepting only what is necessary, dealing with the material world. That's also something, living simply, following Ekadasi, taking on some vratas, very, not being very enthusiastic about, building temples. So not like working so much for money and then that's for Krishna, but actually trying to find, like I said, the majority of these are actually internal, taking care of one's Krishna consciousness. One should not be neglectful in ordinary dealings. One should not be under the spell of lamentation in loss or jubilation in gain. So they come and go. We do what we need to do, but internally we have that connection to our devotional service and Krishna. There are some other ways that a devotee is engaged in devotional service, and this is ways that things like temples do facilitate. So more like communities. And the thing that we miss the most in many ways is on this list of things that we miss during our virtual sessions and not able to gather together as devotees for many different reasons now. But just to be able to accept flower garlands, it's one of them. Accept the flower garlands that have been offered to the Lord. But what a skill that is, flower garland making. Not every devotee knows how to do that. And also we know in spiritual, it's a very elevated service performed by very elevated devotees. And it's such a beautiful service that's appreciated by everybody who comes to the temple. And so what a skill that is. And, to twist the petals a certain way and make the certain patterns, and sometimes they're facing out and sometimes they're stacked, and the infinite variety, and just that itself can be a meditation. But not just a meditation, but that's a skill. Organizing flower garlands for making 1,000 flower garlands. That's not an easy task, and that requires a lot of enthusiastic devotees to come forth and do that. But it also requires a lot of enthusiastic management in terms of how to pull it off, and how many flowers we're going to get, and who do we get the flowers from. Like Muktavanya, who's in India right now, sending us wonderful pictures, is able to bring flowers. But part of that service of bringing flowers is that he has a whole relationship with the people that give the flowers to the temple. They know it's going to the temple, that they know he's a devotee when they see him, he brings them prasadam. And based on that, they give flowers to the temple in different varieties and different amounts. And so just getting the flowers is not just getting the flowers, is actually a whole process and relationships that are involved that aren't always between devotees, but are between devotees and members of the community who are serving the devotees. Another one that Prabhupada gives in this whole Nectar of Devotion list of the 6 called is Rothyatra, and just performing a Rothyatra. Itself, it's visual, the music, the dancing, but the actual putting the parade on, the services, building the cart, decorating the cart, cooking the feasts, lining up the singers, coordinating the guest list. We had such a good taste of that when we had Srila Prabhupada's Arrival Festival in 2015, I think it was back then, and his 50th arrival, where so many nice devotees have come from everywhere to be part of this, and devotee festivals. And we go to New York, but imagine what it takes to run the New York Rothyatra, or what it takes to run the LA Rothyatra, or what Madhuha Prabhu and his team see throughout the run of the Rothyatras. So just a Rothyatra is not just a Rothyatra. It's itself this engagement in devotional service. And then nowadays, everyone with their cell phone is able then to capture that Rothyatra and then send that Rothyatra to other people who aren't in Boston. So it's also engaging others in spreading the holy name around. And that's just by having a Rothyatra, but there's just so many effects in resonating this devotional service. One must render personal service to the deity. One must sing, one must perform Sankirtan, one must chant, one must offer artik at different times. one should offer a voluntary service. And it's nice to see that the temple, before we recently had closed, was able to engage devotees in service. And if they had propensities or desires to do different services again that they had previously done, there were ways to get devotees back into doing those services, because it's just it's a very natural part of being a servant of Krishna, as one performs service to Krishna. And then one should arrange one's devotional service according to one's means. So this does go back to not big temples, And actually, there's a story that Prabhupada he gives actually that it's kind of funny, and I might just jump to it. And it's that Karandar told the story. So our friend and former Boston devotee, Karandar. Karandar told me, this is Badri Narayan telling the story about what Karandar told him, that Prabhupada was walking in the Chevrolet Hills, Los Angeles, and they went past a big house, and Prabhupada said, "Someday we will have a big house like this for Krishna." And everyone said, "Jai, Prabhupada." And then Prabhupada walked a little ways more, and there's a big circular driveway. And in the big circular driveway was a big stretch limo, and he said, "And someday we will have a limousine like this for Krishna." And everyone said, "Jai, Srila Prabhupada." And then they passed a dog, and Prabhupada said, "What a wonderful dog, what a big dog. Someday we'll have a dog like this for Krishna." And everyone said, like, "Jai, Srila Prabhupada." And Prabhupada said, "Why do we need a dog for Krishna?" So we can engage a dog in Krishna's service, and they dance to it. But the point being that when we're going to perform devotional service, we want to perform devotional service in a way that's going to actually be practical. And then this yields a result. And the result is ultimately that you get qualities. There's qualities that you get, and that a devotee is imbued with these qualities. And the price of these qualities is that whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer and give away, whatever austerities you perform, do that, O son of Kunti, as an offering to me. And this is actually, Prabhupada describes real renunciation, is that you're performing devotional service. And a devotee, 1976, had asked, "Srila Prabhupada, trying to satisfy Krishna's senses and not our own senses, that is the principle of renunciation. How can one develop and cultivate renunciation?" Srila Prabhupada replies that first you need to stop sense gratification, and then you need to adopt real sense gratification, begin the real thing. And then he says that the Mayavadi philosophy is actually to stop everything, and that's against what Krishna says. Because Krishna says, "Sarvadharma prityaja," that give up all varieties of religion, but then come to me. He doesn't say just give up all varieties of religion and then just give up all varieties of religion and then you're all set. But actually come to me. Krishna is saying, come to me when you do that. And that this is the proper utilization of one's self in service. But again, what does that look like? It is absolutely something that is like something that a devotee can see. And so what is this devotional service? And so one thing I had wanted to look at was that when I had thought about the resume stuff, was that what does someone who spends time in devotional service, how do they account for these things? There's lofty verses that talk about how the devotee achieves all the great qualities of the demigods by taking up pure devotional service, and that one of those qualities is actually expert. And Krishna Das Kaviraj gives his 26 qualities of a devotee, and one of those qualities is expert. And so a devotee is an expert, actually. And so although we don't think about it as devotees, and a devotee doesn't perform devotional service in the way that they want to become an expert. They want to become an expert because that's how they serve Krishna, is by being an expert. They become very good at their devotional service. but by becoming very good at their devotional service, they actually become very qualified people. And the qualities are like tolerance and like humility. And these actually, in any workplace nowadays, are qualities that many people look for in HR type of things. They have trainings, whole trainings with people for this type of thing: humility, pridelessness, nonviolence. They have trainings for anti-microaggression, anti-discrimination. Work like just different, creating like different like hostile, like workplace environment. Like nowadays, these are our cultural awareness, simplicity. And I remember seeing an article about someone finding out that their life has changed just by waking up at 4 a.m. and just taking advantage of actually that time of the day, and not even in a passionate way, but what they found is that it was a time when they were actually able to calm down and find calm and peace. And that itself, just having time built into their day before the day, so a devotee does that as part of a lifestyle, but that lifestyle is something that people who are successful start to realize that there's something in that lifestyle. Even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events. This is called situational awareness. It's a very good skill to have if there's something wrong with the company, to be able to just, this is like the system with the Brahmins, advising the Kshatriyas, this level-headed, even-minded, seeing all the sides of the thing and not, that this is what someone can bring just by being a devotee. And this is not something that they cultivate. This is something they cultivate by just by living the life of a devotee. And I also remember going back to school and having attended Bhagavatam classes in the morning and different regulated schedules and classes. I felt very comfortable in an educational environment. I remember professors even saying, like, wow, but I can't credit that other than we have Srimad Bhagavatam class every day. And that itself, these are qualities that you get, and you're just engaging in devotional service, and that is making you happy. But as you're happy, you're creating all of these skills, and not just flower garments. We're talking like cake decorating and management and festival planning and communication skills. And these are very real skills that in the world, they have value. And not that everybody wants to go out in the world and work, but a devotee should be fearless and know that they are very, very well equipped to perform lots of devotional service. And the qualification is actually the heart. So what does that look like? And so I did take some advice from Tamal Krishna Maharaj's resume. What I might do here is I might swap my video around, so I think you can see a little bit. But this is a little bit of Tamal Krishna Maharaj's resume. And not to have you read it through the screen, and I'm not very good at clicking the tabs, but 1968, initiated, entitled to perform religious rites. 1972, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was Srila Prabhupada, one of Srila Prabhupada's early sannyasis. He was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, joined in the 60s, and he became a GBC member of ISKCON, an ecclesiastical member and managing religious body of ISKCON. And he was a senior teacher who went back to school to become a professor of comparative religions. And then I believe in the 90s, he passed away in a car accident. But for a lot of his career was in comparative religions and work within temples. And so 1978 to 1995 maintained spiritual standards in the Eastern and North American, India, Midwestern United States, Far East, South Pacific. His teaching posts, instructor of Vaishnava philosophy and theology, 1987 to 1995. So that also includes teaching Bhagavad Gita and teaching Bhagavatam on a regular basis. Bhakti Shastri, he has his VIHE. He was one of the devotees who was the brainstorm of the VIHE, the training programs that we have for ISKCON. something like that. So VIG is on there. Teacher's Daily Class, 1969 to 1995. Teacher's Daily Class on Vedic Scriptures, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Charitamrita. 1969 had taught alternative education programs. But you see how he's able to use the practical skills of devotional service, and not to promote himself, but to promote actually these activities that people can do in Krishna consciousness, and actually fill up years of their life. Thousands of Tamal Krishna Goswami's lectures have been recorded and distributed for almost 20 years to people interested in receiving instruction. His books were Servant of the Servant, and that's a Srila Prabhupada biography. So as devotees, how valuable is that, just to preserve that information, Srila Prabhupada's biographical information and the pastimes that devotees had with Srila Prabhupada? But that itself lends a biography of Srila Prabhupada to the world. Jagannath Priya Nartika. This is the Jagannath play, and it was a play that Srila Prabhupada had really liked, and they put it down into a play form. So that is a play that he wrote. Yoga for the 21st Century. In the 90s, that was like a preaching book that book distributors were distributing. The Final Pastimes of Srila Prabhupada, because he was there when Srila Prabhupada left. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj's diary, the TKG diary. And TKG diary is this wonderful and very, very heart-rending account of Srila Prabhupada leaving. And it's a must for devotees on Srila Prabhupada's disappearance day. And for a while, the temple was reading that as part of the morning class, is this account of Srila Prabhupada leaving. It's a very sobering diary, but sort of a must. But another resume would be Hridananda Das Goswami. And Hridananda Das Goswami was a Harvard professor, but he had traveled mainly in California. But originally, he had joined the temple. I can't remember where he originally joined, but he ended up in Boston in the Second Temple in the 1970s. And he had sort of been in and out of Boston for many, many years. And for a while, he did end up in Harvard. But his publications include a comprehensive guide to the Bhagavad Gita. He also was one of the main editors of Srimad Bhagavatam, cantos 11 and 12, which when Srila Prabhupada completed up till the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and Hridananda Das Goswami, amongst others, were the team that finished the Bhagavatam. So the Bhagavatam that we read, the 11th and 12th cantos, actually come from Hridananda Das Goswami. But that itself has given him a lot of credential in terms of translating Sanskrit. He also writes articles on multi-guru societies, Vishnu and Krishna in the Mahabharata, and state and society in ancient India. His main work is the Mahabharata and sort of social structures through it. So he's a Sanskrit translator, translates the Mahabharata, and summary of Vaishnava philosophy, the goddess in the Mahabharata, translation of the Purusha Sukta hymn, transmission of Shastra in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and Krishna conscious conversion. And the same thing, he was actually a book distributor and worked with the BBT for a number of years. So again, Krishna conscious conversion, a personal account, no doubt, on his part, but also with working amongst other people. Another devotee is Garuda Prabhu. Now, Garuda Prabhu is also a friend of the Boston Temple, and he was also studying and teaching at Harvard, and he was teaching Sanskrit and Bhagavad Gita at Harvard. He was a lecturer there, lecturer at University of North Carolina, Duke University, associate professor of Sanskrit at University of Washington. He was on a number of consultation committees and conducted yoga workshops, seminars, and given lectures. Traveled to India. So in the same thing, these are devotees. And these are devotees who have spent their life in devotional service. But the result of that, and not every devotee has to do a resume, or even needs one, actually, because we just want to serve Krishna, actually. And so a devotee, though, has qualities. And it may be good to take inventory of what those qualities are, because you may be a very good servant to Krishna in particular ways that you don't know that you can do. And so something like that really just focus on devotional service. Focus on doing devotional service that brings you joy. And also devotional service that is a little bit easy for you. And that's okay, because from that, you'll get more service, no doubt. I remember that was my first service. And again, we had heard about Krishna before we came to the temple, but you had to be at the temple to meet Panamandit. And that was when devotional service really started. It was Panamandit handing us rags and said, hey, the Sunday feast is about to start. Will you help in the temple? And that's not something that is an internal process, but the internal process complements that, so that even that is this promise in this verse, is that you can mop Krishna's floor and become completely famous throughout the three worlds, because Krishna is carrying what we lack, and Krishna is preserving what we have. So by being a devotee, we're not missing out on anything. We're not missing out by not performing activities, but we have to find ways to engage and offer those activities. But even if we're having difficulty with that, just by engaging in devotional activities, just by coming together and chanting, just by coming together and associating, just by these things, these themselves bring about results as well. So we do pray the day when we can come back together and we can serve in Mass as a group of devotees. There's a wonderful feeling that comes with that. So I can finish here. We have about 2 minutes. If anybody had any questions or comments, and if you have it here, I don't know if the destination is YouTube, but if you do find us on YouTube and you want to continue the comments, you can leave them in the YouTube comments. Two words popped out also in the word-for-word translation. I can share those. One is Chintayanta. This Prabhupada translated concentrating, Chintayanta. Chintayanta, without anxiety, without fear, without invasive anxiety. And Vahami. What is it? Oh, Abhayuktanam. Connected near to. Prabhupada says fixed in devotion means connected near to also. So we pray to stay connected near to devotion, because when we do that, I preserve what they have and I carry what they lack. So I will finish here. And again, let me read the translation of the verse. But those who always worship me with exclusive devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. So awesome. I see the deity's curtain is about to open. So thank you all very, very much. And Hare Krishna. I appreciate this opportunity.